The July sun in Texas gilded the roofs of upscale homes in the HOA-managed neighborhood. The sweltering summer heat was slightly eased by a breeze from the misting fan in the corner of the yard. I busily arranged fresh ribs on the grill, the scent of hickory smoke mingling with the sizzle of fat dripping onto glowing coals. Jake, my son, sat in his blue wheelchair, last year's birthday gift from his dad, his eyes lighting up as I brought out the first platter of grilled meat. "I can eat myself, Mom," he stammered through the AAC, augmentative and alternative communication, device mounted on his chest. His hands, clenched from cerebral palsy, trembled as they gripped a plastic spoon, beads of sweat dotting his forehead. My heart tightened, as it always did when I watched him struggle with what should have been simple. My husband, Mark, patted my shoulder and whispered, "See? He's our little warrior." The barbecue began with country music drifting from a Bluetooth speaker. Miss Thompson, our kind 70-year-old neighbor, brought her classic potato salad. Mr. Davis from across the street chuckled as Jake tapped his spoon rhythmically against his chair. The moment felt like a living Norman Rockwell painting, warm, radiant, and full of love, until the tall, looming figure appeared at the iron gate. Karen stormed in like a black tornado. Her flaxen linen dress, dyed a milky coffee shade, which I later learned was vegan-friendly fabric free from insect harm, hung awkwardly on her bony frame. The pungent patchouli oil clinging to her overpowered the smoky aroma of barbecue. On her chest, the slogan "Go vegan or go to hell" blazed red like blood. "Have you even read the HOA rules?" Karen's shrill voice cut through the laughter. Her green-polished finger jabbed at the grill. Section 7A, Clause 3. Prohibited activities include air pollution and inhumane practices. Mark stepped forward calmly. "This is our backyard, Karen. Barbecue isn't a violation." "Not a violation?" She jerked her chin toward Jake, who was struggling to lift a rib to his mouth. The AAC device chirped in a synthetic child's voice. "So good." Karen squinted as if witnessing a crime. "Teaching a disabled child to eat corpses? Have you no humanity?" My face flushed. "Don't you dare use his disability like that. Jake's just aiding Amazon deforestation." Karen interrupted, raising her phone to record. "Every beef bite destroys rainforests. Are you trying to ruin our children's future?" Jake whimpered, his eyes wide with panic. The spoon clattered onto the plate. I knelt beside him, wiping barbecue sauce from his chin with shaking hands. "It's okay, sweetheart. Mama's here. You should be ashamed." Karen aimed her camera at me. "Instead of teaching him to respect nature, you're feeding him a culture of slaughter." Mr. Davis stepped forward, red-faced. "Go home, Karen. This isn't HOA business." "Isn't it?" She yanked a yellowed HOA board member badge from her pocket. "I'm newly elected. I have the authority to enforce community standards." The wind died. Cicadas buzzed harshly. Jake trembled, his spasming fingers frantically tapping the AAC. The robotic voice stuttered, "I'm hungry. Please, stop. You tiny murderer." Karen snarled. She snatched the plate from Jake's lap, sending ribs flying onto the grass. The AAC device crashed to the ground, emitting error beeps like a siren. I clutched Jake, feeling his heart pound through his thin shirt. "Get out!" I roared, my voice unrecognizable. Karen smirked. "I'm not leaving until..." She pointed at the smoking grill. "You shut down this crematorium and apologize publicly." Just then, Jake's shaking hand gripped my pants. His tear-filled eyes stared up, haunted. The shattered AC screen lay face up on the ground, a symbol of stolen voice. In that moment, I smelled the sour stench of hatred. The air froze like shattered glass. Karen stood holding the sauce-smeared plate, glaring at Jake as if he were a stray animal. The wind carried charred grill smoke and her cloying patchouli stench, churning my stomach. "Give it back!" Jake tugged my sleeve, tears streaming. He reached for the broken AC, its plastic shards glittering like frozen tears. Karen snorted, lifting the plate higher. "Want it? Come get it." She sneered, her linen dress fluttering to reveal a Sanskrit ankle tattoo. Likely compassion or non-violence. A cruel irony. I hugged Jake, feeling his small body quake like a leaf in a storm. Enough, Karen. My voice cracked. This is my home. My child just wants dinner. Dinner. She gestured at the scattered ribs. This is a mobile graveyard. You're raising a junior killer. She hurled the plate against an oak tree, shattering it. Jake screamed. His hands clawed my shoulders, leaving white marks. In his eyes, I saw primal fear, an emotion no child should feel in their own yard. Karen loomed over us. If you won't teach him, she leaned down, kombucha breath hitting my face. I will. Before I could process what was happening, a sharp slap echoed through the air. Karen's bony, silver-ringed hand swung through the air, leaving a bright red mark on Jake's left cheek. Time seemed to freeze. Jake lurched backward, his head hitting the wheelchair with a loud thud. A red superhero-themed napkin fluttered to the ground, soaked with tears and drool. A small drop of blood dripped from the corner of his lip onto his Mickey Mouse t-shirt, staining the cheerful mouse's face with a dark red blotch. No! My scream echoed through the neighborhood. Blind with rage, I lunged at Karen, grabbing a fistful of her greasy, lemon-scented hair. She shrieked, struggling as her fake leather purse fell to the ground, spilling Go Vegan flyers stained with blood. Neighbors swarmed in like a disturbed beehive. Mr. Davis used his burly frame to wedge himself between us. Ms. Thompson cradled Jake in her arms, her trembling hands wiping the blood from his face with the corner of her apron. The distant wail of police sirens blended with Jake's choked sobs. Broken, gurgling sounds like a duck being strangled. You monster! You devil! I screamed, restrained by my husband's arms. Karen leaned against a tree, panting but still adjusting her crooked slogan shirt. Blood from a scratch on her cheek dripped down her neck, mingling with her lopsided green stone necklace. I was just teaching him a lesson. Karen stammered, her eyes darting to Ms. Thompson's phone recording the scene. The law will side with me. You're all accomplices in animal genocide. Jake whimpered in Ms. Thompson's arms. His wide brown eyes peered through the chaos, fixated on his overturned wheelchair. His trembling, clenched hand reached for the shattered plastic spoon on the ground, the only tool that allowed him to feed himself. My husband suddenly released me. He knelt beside Jake, tearing off his sweat-soaked t-shirt. It's okay, son. His voice trembled as he pressed the fabric to the small cut on Jake's lip. Dad's here. Mom and Dad are here. Karen suddenly burst into laughter. A hoarse, defiant cackle. See? Animal blood has poisoned your minds. Even the child has become... A splatter of barbecue sauce hit Karen square in the face. Miss Thompson stood there, holding a Princess Elsa-themed plastic watering can, her eyes blazing with fury. Shut your mouth, you monster! The 73-year-old growled in her thick Texan accent. You disgrace! You child abuser! The crowd began to stir. A tomato flew from someone's fence, exploding on Karen's shoulder. Shouts erupted. Get out of here! You lunatic! The cops are coming! Karen retreated toward the gate, her face pale but still trying to maintain her composure. She held up her phone. I've recorded everything. You'll pay for this. This is a targeted attack on a vegan. A police car screeched to a halt at the gate. 2 officers jumped out, hands on their holsters. Everyone, calm down. What's going on here? Karen instantly transformed into the victim. She clutched her face, sobbing dramatically. They attacked me. They're poisoning children and assaulting me for standing up for the environment. I held Jake, trembling, feeling my shirt soaked with his tears and blood. She hit my son. I whispered to the black officer examining Jake's injuries. He has cerebral palsy. He couldn't defend himself. The younger officer sighed. He picked up the shattered AAC device, its cracked screen still flashing the words, I'm scared. Officer. A young woman from across the street ran over, holding her phone. I recorded everything from my balcony. Here's the evidence. Karen fell silent. Her face turned ashen as the video of her slapping Jake played on the phone screen. Beads of sweat mixed with her vegan sunscreen, creating strange streaks on her face. "You have the right to remain silent," the older officer said, snapping handcuffs onto Karen's thin wrists. "Anything you say can and will be used against you in court." As Karen ranted about animal rights and the meat industry conspiracy, I gently placed my hand on Jake's chest. His heart pounded like a trapped bird. The hand-shaped bruise on his cheek had deepened to a dark purple, a color no child's skin should ever bear. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, baby," I whispered into Jake's soft hair, still smelling of his children's shampoo. Behind me, Karen's screams continued. "You don't understand. I'm saving the world. I am the atom of universal love." But in my arms, the universe had shrunk to an 8-year-old boy sobbing uncontrollably, his clenched hands clinging to my shirt as if drowning in a nightmare with no escape. The clock in the interrogation room ticked slowly. Karen sat hunched on a cold metal chair, her fingers nervously tapping her confiscated phone. The smell of patchouli oil mixed with the sharp odor of disinfectant, making the detective across from her grimace. "Do you want to call a lawyer?" Detective Ramirez asked, flipping through a thick file of neighborhood complaints about Karen. He glanced at the long scratch on her cheek, a souvenir from her scuffle with Ms. Thompson. Karen looked up, her eyes bloodshot. "I am my own lawyer. Don't you see? This is all a conspiracy by the livestock industry." She slammed her hand on the table, knocking over her gold-plated HOA badge. "They want to silence me because I dare to protect the earth." In the observation room next door, I clutched my husband's hand as we watched the CCTV feed. Jake was asleep on a bench in the hallway, the bruise on his cheek now covered with a bandage. The new AAC device, a gift from an anonymous donor, emitted soft, rhythmic breaths like a lullaby. "What will happen to her?" I whispered to the officer on duty. "Assault on a minor, battery, HOA violations." He glanced at the file. "We're still reviewing the security footage." Just then, there was a knock at the door. A young female officer entered, her face pale as she held up a USB drive. "Sir, the digital forensics team just found this." The footage from Mr. Davis's security camera played on the screen. The overhead angle captured everything. Karen's hands swinging like a whip, Jake's small body lurching backward, the wheelchair crashing to the ground. My scream in the video made Detective Ramirez clench his fists. Karen suddenly shot to her feet. "That's a deep fake. You staged all of this?" she shrieked, spittle flying. "I demand a forensic examination. DNA testing. Check. Sit down," Ramirez barked. He opened his laptop, projecting a series of photos taken from Karen's house. Frozen meat secretly buried in her backyard. Receipts for fur purchases from luxury boutiques. "You accused your neighbors of throwing away chicken bones, but you're the one who..." The interrogation room door swung open. Karen's lawyer, a woman in a dark, perfume-soaked suit, entered with a glossy leather briefcase. "My client will not answer any further questions." On the way home at sunset, I received a call from the HOA president. His voice was icy. "We're holding an emergency meeting. We expect your family to attend and share your perspective." The next morning, the HOA meeting room was packed. Karen sat in the corner, her face masked but her hostile glare unmistakable. Rows of oak chairs creaked under the weight of over 200 furious residents. The HOA president banged his gavel. "Under Bylaw 12E, we are considering the removal of Karen W. from the board." A thunderous applause erupted. Ms. Thompson stood up, her hands trembling as she held a piece of paper. "I've lived here for 30 years. I've never seen anyone as cruel as her." She flipped through photos of her trash can filled with sausage wrappers, evidence Karen had planted to frame her. A blue-haired young man in the back raised his phone. She even mocked my son's weight in a private Facebook group. The screen displayed Karen's messages to friends. "That kid looks like a piglet ready for slaughter." The crowd growled. Karen jumped to her feet. "You're blaming me because you refuse to face the truth. Death is creeping in from..." "Shut up, you lunatic," a Latino man shouted. "My daughter stopped eating because you threatened to expel her for bringing a ham sandwich to school." The HOA president raised his hand for order. He projected an email Karen had sent to the board 3 months prior. Request to ban obese and disabled children from the pool to prevent water contamination. The room fell silent as an image of Jake appeared, smiling brightly in the therapy pool, his atrophied legs floating in the blue water. Someone in the room choked back a sob. "I like swimming." The electronic voice from Jake's new AAC device echoed in the silent room. Everyone turned to the boy in his wheelchair, his trembling finger pressing the touchscreen. "Please don't ban." Tears streamed down the face of an 80-year-old man in the front row. The HOA president sighed. "Let's vote. All in favor of removing Karen." A forest of hands shot up. Karen screamed like a wild animal. "You'll regret this. I am the voice of conscience." The honk of a moving truck cut her off. Outside the window, movers were unloading boxes from Karen's mansion. Her husband, a former philosophy professor, stood silently crying, clutching a shattered family photo. That evening, I opened my laptop to check emails. Thousands of messages of support poured in from around the world. A U.S. veteran sent Jake a Marvel comic collection. Harvard law students offered free legal aid. The hashtag Justice for Jake trended on Twitter with 2 million tweets. Then a TikTok video stopped me cold. It showed Karen in 2019, smashing a meat counter in a supermarket and screaming, "You blind murderers!" The video was posted by her own sister, who had cut ties years ago. "She's always been obsessed with power," the caption read. "After our parents died in a livestock truck accident, Karen lost herself. That night, I lay awake watching Jake sleep. His tiny hand clutched a toy tank, a gift from a soldier we'd never met. Under the glow of the moon-shaped night light, the bruise on his cheek had faded to a yellowish hue. Suddenly, my phone buzzed. An unknown number. I put it on speaker. "This is CNN. We'd like to interview your family about the incident." I looked down at Jake. The AAC device blinked with a green light. Slowly, his trembling fingers pressed the microphone icon. "No need noise," the synthetic voice said. "Just want barbecue fun." Tears fell onto my keyboard. Outside, the North Star twinkled in the vast Texas sky. Somewhere in the shadows, Karen's empty house stood like an abandoned cocoon. The Texas autumn arrived with a chilly breeze, blowing away the for sale signs in front of Karen's former mansion. I leaned against the living room window, watching the last moving truck drive out of the neighborhood. On the neighbor's lawn, children played tag, their laughter echoing into the empty house with its scratched walls, a relic of a life in ruins. Jake tugged my sleeve, his new AC device chirping in a clear voice. "Mom, today, barbecue." His smile was like sunlight breaking through the clouds in my heart. The bruise on his cheek had vanished, leaving only a faint pink mark, a gentle reminder of resilience. We didn't expect to run into Karen at Whole Foods. She stood hunched over the discounted vegan food section, her bony fingers fumbling through nearly expired tofu packages. A frayed hoodie covered her dull, once blonde hair, and her scuffed rubber sandals looked worn and dirty. Her face, once full of arrogance, was now gaunt, her eyes shadowed like a sleepwalker's. "Should I say hi?" Jake pressed the button on his AAC device, his wide eyes filled with confusion. Karen turned abruptly. Her gaze swept past us, hesitating for a second, before she quickly turned away, hurriedly stuffing a bottle of red wine into her cloth bag. But it was too late. "Karen," I called, my voice calmer than I expected. She froze. Her worn leather wallet, holding only a few coins, slipped from her hands and clattered to the floor. I wasn't." Her voice was hoarse, her hands trembling as she picked up the scattered coins. Jake maneuvered his wheelchair closer, the AAC device chiming. "Are you okay?" Karen looked up. For the first time, I saw her gray-blue eyes glistening with tears. "Why don't you hate me?" Her voice was a wounded whimper. "Why don't you curse me like the rest of the world?" Jake's clenched fingers tapped the touchscreen. Dad says everyone deserves a second chance. I held my breath. It was something Mark always told Jake after a failed physical therapy session. Karen buried her face in her hands, sobbing. Her choked cries blended with the soft music playing over the supermarket speakers. I was wrong from the start, she mumbled through her thin fingers. My parents died in a crash with a mad cow truck. I thought hating animals would make me strong. Jake reached into the shopping cart and pulled out a laundry bag. It had a picture of a puppy and the words, "Spread love." He handed it to Karen with trembling hands. No need for hate, the AC voice said. 2 weeks later, our barbecue became a city-wide event. The green swing set was replaced with long tables covered in white cloths, piled high with grilled meat, vegetables, and even vegan options for those who wanted to try. Dozens of children with disabilities from special centers were brought in, their laughter mingling with the twang of country music. Karen arrived at sunset. She stood hesitantly behind an old oak tree, wearing a clean but outdated dress, holding a gift wrapped in newspaper. Jake noticed her first. "Come, eat with us." His AC voice echoed across the yard. Hundreds of eyes turned to Karen. She looked like a lost fawn but eventually stepped forward under the crowd's scrutiny. "I made vegan food for everyone," Karen said, opening the box to reveal steaming falafel. "It's my mom's recipe from long ago." Silence. Then Miss Thompson, the one who had thrown sauce at Karen, stepped forward. She dipped a falafel into tahini, took a bite, and nodded. "Not bad, but still no match for my ribs." The yard erupted in laughter. Karen smiled faintly, a genuine smile, not smug or forced. That night, as the children slept on mattresses scattered across the living room, I found Karen sitting alone by the pool. "I've lost everything," she whispered, her fingers tracing a 1998 swimming champion medal. "But thank you for showing me what real love looks like." In her pocket, I caught a glimpse of a psychiatric hospital admission form. She quickly hid it and stood up. "I'm checking into the facility tomorrow. Maybe I'll learn how to start over." Jake woke up and wheeled himself onto the porch. The bright moonlight illuminated his glowing AAC device. "Wish you happiness." Karen knelt and hugged him. For the first time, her embrace held no aggression. On moving day, we received an anonymous package. Inside was a set of bamboo vegan utensils carved with superhero designs and a scribbled note, "For Jake, from a friend learning kindness." On the dining table, Mark planted a small flag that read, "Meat or vegan doesn't matter. Human connection is the best barbecue." Jake laughed, his clumsy hands tapping the new grill. The fragrant smoke rose, blending with the music, carrying the scent of forgiveness. The campfire dwindled, its ashes rising to join the Milky Way. Out there, perhaps all wounds can heal when we dare to let go of hatred and embrace love. Like the harsh Texas winter giving way to spring, new seeds will grow from the ashes of old choices.